I was talking about the same shit you're witnessing years ago. Because why? Because how? Because time doesn't exist for me, like I keep saying. And I can see shit happening from a mile away and from thousands of years away. And I'm going to continue to tell you fools what's going to happen. I'm not trying to convince anybody, right?
Yeah.
And he told me I don't have to convince nobody. We just going to show them. I told you so.
King Smarty has been right time and time again. However, where there is truth, there is censorship. This is especially true with the King of Kings. But why would they want you to know that Jesus Christ himself is back and walking the earth? King Smarty's obsessive levels of censorship begins to make a whole lot of sense with this in mind. But it also continues to expose that he is who he says he is and exposes the cabal's treachery and corruption. How ironic that the video about King Smarty being censored titled, "The Most Censored Man in the World," was censored and taken down. So were his videos on his free hollows, which are images instilled with healing frequencies anybody can freely download from his website.
The ranking member just said that quote, Joe Biden was opposed to corruption. Really? So opposed, he leveraged $1 billion of American tax money to fire the prosecutor in Ukraine who was investigating Zolochevsky at Burisma, the company Hunter Biden sat on the board of. Wow. And the prosecutor who replaced Shokin, that Mr. Parnas referenced in his opening statement, Mr. Lutsenko, guess what he did? He took Zolochevsky off the wanted list and dropped the charges. Wow, he's really, really opposed to corruption there. Mr. Bobolinsky, who's the big guy? Are you sure about that? Because when
Joe Biden.
You're sure?
I'm 1,000% sure.
Because when Hunter Biden did his deposition under oath, he said, I don't know who it is, even though he was copied on an email that said H will hold 10% for the big guy. You sure it's the big guy is Joe Biden?
1,000%, and there's other text messages that back that up, that the brave whistleblowers, Shapley and Ziegler, have produced, not from my phones, not from my BlackBerry that I took screenshots from. They took them from subpoenas directly from Apple's iCloud that back up the fact that Hunter knew the big guy was Joe Biden.
The big guy is the brand, the big guy is the lift, the big guy is the one who showed up at golf outings, who took phone calls and meetings and lunches and dinners with Hunter Biden and his business associates. Is that right?
Correct.
When did Jeffrey Epstein die?
It's like 2019, right? It was like late 2019. So yeah, August. So Jeffrey Epstein could have died and he could have taken on Biden's body and he could have been Joe Biden for the 4 years that Joe Biden was the president. Okay, versus height. Man, guys. Joe Biden versus Jeffrey Epstein. Wait. This is getting eye color? Oh no, eye color. No. No. See this shoe size? Okay.
So Trump likes to claim that he kicked Epstein out of his club in the 2000s. He hated Epstein. He has never been good friends with Epstein, yada, yada, yada. But there are emails within the newest drop of Epstein files that completely debunk that assertion of his. So this is an email chain, for example, from 2018 between Jeffrey Epstein and a guy named Larry Summers. So as you can see at the bottom, December 21st, Larry Summers writes to Epstein, yes, want to discuss the Donald at some point. I don't know if that's referring to Trump or not or whatever. But then Epstein writes back, I'm in Palm Beach all weekend. Then, this is where it gets interesting, Larry emails him back, we'll call tonight or at some point, will you be visiting Mar-a-Lago? And then at the very top, Epstein says, being asked for 3 names to replace Mnuchin. So Mnuchin, Steven Mnuchin, was actually Trump's Secretary of the Treasury during his first term. So if you read this email and take it at face value, it sounds like people from the administration were asking Jeffrey Epstein 3 names of individuals he thought could replace Mnuchin. And it's interesting, Larry Summers is one of Jeffrey Epstein's closest friends. So if the stories were true and Jeffrey Epstein was removed from Mar-a-Lago and banned from the property and Trump never talked to him again after that point in the 2000s, why would Larry Summers be asking Jeffrey Epstein if he'd be going to Mar-a-Lago? That just doesn't make sense unless he had been back in the years since. But if that's not enough for you, here's another email from 2012. Subject, what does J.E. think of going to Mar-a-Lago after Christmas instead of his island? So we don't know who sent this or where this came from, and we also don't know who received this message, but as you can see in the text, September 28th, 2012, 3:30 p.m., what does J.E., Jeffrey Epstein, think of going to Mar-a-Lago after Xmas instead of his island? Then you've got another email chain here from 2011. As you can see at the bottom, Jeffrey Epstein is talking about this girl making allegations who claims she worked at Mar-a-Lago. Then a guy, Nicholas, who I believe was Jeffrey's attorney, says, call you in the AM, I will check. And you can see even at the bottom, he says, I don't know how Donald would respond. And then Jeffrey sent this to Ghislaine, and you can see Ghislaine at the top said, I thought you said not to involve Donald. Anyway, so now the die is case. And she basically goes on to talk about how they're going to involve Donald. Let's see if you get the info. Please confirm the labor law. They need info from Mar-a-Lago, whatever. These are just 3 instances out of the hundreds of mentions of Mar-a-Lago in the Epstein files. But to me, these 3 instances clearly and definitively show that Epstein wasn't banned from Mar-a-Lago when Trump said he was, and that Trump and Epstein at least minimally kept in contact.
Something really interesting and honestly pretty revealing is happening inside of MAGA right now. For years, MAGA has been united around one idea. Donald Trump is the victim of the media, of the Democrats, of the deep state. But now, parts of MAGA are turning suspicion inward. Right-wing influencers and Telegram channels are circulating what they're calling a bombshell document, claiming Trump is compromised and acting in Israel's interest. And who do they say is behind it? Jared Kushner. They're actually arguing that Kushner, not Trump, is running policy, shaping decisions and pulling strings. That Trump is either influenced, trolled, or sidelined.
The people of Iran are marking their place in history and standing with God. They just burnt down a statue of Baal or Moloch in protest against all the demonic people who oppose the country of Iran in the current leadership.
Some of Trump's biggest offenders are finally turning on him. Joe Rogan just slammed Trump's immigration crackdown, saying due process matters. Candace Owens called out Trump for attacking Harvard, saying it's a direct assault on free speech. Obviously it is. Ben Shapiro, he's done with Trump's tariffs, calling them a hidden tax on Americans. And Dave Portnoy just dragged the MAGA base for blindly following Trump and ignoring real policy failures. These voices helped build the Trump movement. Honestly, without those 4, he probably wouldn't have got elected.
I'm going to show you guys. I'm showing you guys already in all of these interviews, these videos that we're doing. I'm showing you guys. I'm telling you guys what's going to happen before it happens. Okay, so we're going to have a GCR, global currency reset. We're going to liberate the planet from all the ones that use us as cattle, all right, because they do. That's what the human trafficking is all about. We're going to have an economical boom and a free energy boom and a super advanced healing technology boom. Because they programmed the whole thing from start to finish. Now they're banking off of your birth certificate that they put your footprint on from the beginning. Now that's paying the entire system that they got going. It's all been planned.
Since I have been bombarded, as have many people, with this notion of something called Nasara Jasara. Now, I'm pretty sure I have been bombarded, as have many people, with this notion of something called Nasara Jasara. Now, I'm pretty sure you're more across this than me, Jason, because I thought that sounds ridiculous. It's never going to happen. You know, that's sort of hopium, and what could it mean? But then I started to learn about the UCC, and when I do speeches myself or when I MC and open for other people, I always talk about the UCC, which is the Uniform Commercial Code. Now, this Uniform Commercial Code, you would imagine, because it's commercial, has no bearing on us. Now, for a long time, I've researched and looked into this whole straw man scenario where all of your bills and your licenses and your passport and birth certificate and everything, your name is in capitals. And there are political parties in Australia, independent freedom parties, who say if any of these corflutes have names in capitals, you shouldn't vote for them, because that's not us. Your birth name is in English. You know, if it was Nicola, it's a big N and then small letters, and these capitals represent commercial. Now, they have been trying to draw humanity into corporate law, commercial law, for a long time. I believe ruthlessly it's behind the trans agenda and all of this identifying as other things, because once you publicly declare and legally declare, you know, I identify as a bridge or a cat or a puppy, you're actually taking yourself out of man-woman status legally, and once you do that, you're seen differently by the court. So a legal precedent has been set by a guy in Texas yesterday. Right now, all of this UCC commercial code, look it up, do your own research, has been allowed to fraudulently use us, human beings, as secured collateral for a long time, probably at least since 2014. Now, they've been able to do this lawfully because there were legal precedents for it, and yesterday the legal precedent ended. So let me read to you what has happened. You can look it up in the press. The UCC has now defaulted to the UCC 1. This is I'm not over-exaggerating when I say this is the biggest news humanity, human beings, have ever received since the birth of Christ. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. This is the end of slavery. Right. So basically, the headline is mankind is free. A guy called Govinda Tidbal, I think he's of Indian heritage, but he's a Texan guy. So he says that there was a birth bond issue, and he was looking into it, and this is a straw man thing. So he was worried that it was a corruption lever, and as he looked into it, he realized it was. So it's the securitization of the living as a credit value on the dead. Sounds quite confusing. What does that mean? But it means that the living must pay for the dead. So cue the pandemic, right? The living are paying for the dead. So what it basically means is he has children, and once he'd learned all this information, his wife was pregnant and he was about to have a son. When the son was born, because he'd learned all of this, he, in his birth plan that he gave to the hospital, part of the birth plan was that the family get to keep the cord and the placenta. This is going to sound crazy, but this is what's happened with this UCC 1. Because he learned that the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code, and courts in America had deemed the cord and the placenta, which at the time of birth are alive. They then ask you they say to you, would you like to cut the cord? In the moment that you say yes and you cut the cord and the placenta become a deceased twin of the living baby. This is how dark and greedy these people are, and the banks and financial institutions are behind it. What they then do is enslave the living child as a secured creditor to pay the debts of the dead twin, which was never a twin. It was a placenta and a cord. Can you believe this stuff? Let me read on. So he said, your fraudulent birth certificate is a corporatization of you, the living, right? And apparently 100 years ago, there was a guy called Edward Mendel House, and this was the evil way to kill the spawn of people at the moment of birth. And then it goes into the umbilical cord and what I just explained. He said it's all about property ownership. He said if you own a piece of silver and keep it as a piece of silver, it holds its value. But if you mix it with gold, it's considered corrupted. So this is what they were trying to do with us. It's securities fraud. It's a fraudulent security. And he claimed in court, Govinda, that the biological property of his child is his in the birth plan. No consent was given. So then a fraudulent securities instrument was still created, even though he said that in his birth plan. They still considered his son's cord and placenta as a dead twin, right? So they went ahead and did that, even though that was in his birth plan. They really messed with the wrong guy, Jason, right? So they said that he contracted with them, but he didn't. So they tested him to see if he knew what he was really talking about in court. So he believes, he said in court, that we're here to live and experience this planet and serve God, not as collateralization, right? So they make us the collateralization of the living, and that he's created a legal instrument so it's no longer in their hands. He has legally removed it. So it's now known as a public fraud. It's called a perfected claim. You're all going to have to research this on your own. I can actually put a link in of him describing this much better than I, right? These are just the headlines of it. So something called a final declaration has occurred under law. It is now a fact in law, and there is no debate. Anyone can see it. Anyone can bring it into any court case that they have, anyone they like, anywhere in the world. They are now, these people, the financial institutions, are now the debtor of the living. It's been flipped in UCC 1. It's a reversal, and Nasara Jasara is apparently now lawful, and in essence. So there is a criminal and a fraudulent side to what they've done. So as per the RICO code in America, people must be paid triple times 3 what was taken from them when they were used as secure collateral. Now, people our age, Jason, in their cestic of age trust, which is this secure collateral on our lifetime of work, paying the debts of the dead, is approximately, can be up to $1 billion. So they would owe each individual in that case $3 billion. That's what this case defines. It's called a legal precedent under the US code and the UCC code. This is all factual. You're going to die when you see the clip. It's what he said. It's why Doge exists. Doge is using this instrument now. There are lots of institutions involved, financial institutions around the world, and they can no longer do this. So it's a restoration of the living man globally. Physical bodies have been unfairly incorporated by a birth certificate bond with the name in all caps. It takes time to adjust, but they are now in something with the living. I can't read my own writing. They may not use us basically as secure collateral anymore. The all caps fraud is gone. It's over. The institutions will be breaking the law the next time they do this. I'm talking a bill, a fine, a birth certificate, a license, a passport, anything. If they do it in all caps and bring you into corporation, they're breaking the law. It's called a misprism of fraud and a felony by holding the living as secured collateral. He's had a win, Jason. There is now legal precedent. They can't do this to us anymore, and it's the end of slavery.
Look at that. The President of the United States of Israel and his lapdog, Benjamin Netanyahu Milkowski, landed in the United States on February 12th. And while en route, he crossed over the airspace of not 1, not 2, but 3 ICC member states. I don't know, he's just living on the edge, I guess. But let me remind you what happened a few days before. On January 26th, the United States deployed the USS Abraham Lincoln, and it was on its way to Iran. But then, somehow, nothing happened. I mean, Trump said that no one convinced him not to attack Iran, that he convinced himself. Anyways, and then the real president of the United States of Israel landed, and then he had some talks with his lapdog. And then suddenly, a second ship was deployed towards Iran. Apparently tensions are on the rise. But there were no tensions between January 26th and February 12th. I wonder what happened.
A sign from God. Just hours after the Pope announced his surprise resignation, the heavens over Rome opened and the top of St. Peter's Basilica was struck by lightning.
To think that the statue of St. Peter was struck by lightning on the Pope's birthday at the issuance of this document, the halo was knocked off and the keys fell out of his hands.
Pope's birthday, December 17th, the day before the publication of Fiducia Supplicans, lightning pulverized the key and halo of a statue of St. Peter. Make of it what you will.
Someone there look into it, and sure enough, it was true that lightning struck the statue, didn't destroy the statue, but actually struck the hand off that was holding the keys. Come out on that day. It struck me as memorable and significant as the lightning striking St. Peter's when the Pope Benedict resigned.
I'll show you some extraordinary pictures which came to us from the Vatican on what was of course an extraordinary day. Within hours of Pope Benedict announcing that he was to resign, look at this. Lightning struck St. Peter's Basilica. You can see it again now in slow motion. Extraordinary. It happened just before 6 o'clock in the evening, local time.
Know this and feel this from the bottom of my heart and soul, because I've been activated, and I know I've been activated, and over these years, I've been doing disclosure and talking about, actually one of the main important things that, there are helicopters, planes, all of these things flying around right now, which are the secret space program. And, and people are starting to report them, and, on TikTok and all that. They're looking, they're reporting unusual air traffic, because this is the beginning of the Great Intimidation.